for governmental actors and focusing on the preeminence of elections in selecting policymakers.
Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Professor, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here today, and congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
You clerked for Justice Thomas on the Supreme Court. You also testified before this committee against the Supreme Court ethics reform legislation at a hearing in June of 2023. That hearing followed investigative reporting that revealed Justice Clarence Thomas received and failed to disclose gifts worth millions of dollars, with some estimates placing the total value at over $4 million. This was confirmed by exhaustive committee investigation and subpoenas that my staff and I conducted when I was chairman of the committee. So I have several questions I'd like to ask you first. If you are confirmed to serve on the Third Circuit, will you commit to abiding by all the rules and regulations governing judicial ethics, including federal statutes and the Code of Conduct for U.S. judges?
Oh, Senator, absolutely. I would be committed to all ethics requirements. Yes, Senator.
I'm going to assume, unless you say otherwise, that you had no personal knowledge of Clarence Thomas's receiving any gifts.
Senator, of course, that is correct. I was his law clerk. Yes.
All right. You came before this committee to testify on an effort we're making to try to establish a code of ethics for the highest court in the land. We know that there is a code of ethics that applies to federal judges other than the Supreme Court and how it is enforced. And we're trying to write something that would apply to Supreme Court Justice Thomas or any others who have millions of dollars worth of undisclosed gifts. Since you came and testified against our legislation, I'll ask you a very general question. How do you believe the Supreme Court should be governed when it comes to ethics?
Well, so Senator, I was grateful to have the opportunity to come here back at that time during a challenging time. Just on your earlier questions, I just need to say again how honored I was to serve as a law clerk for Justice Thomas and have the deepest respect for him and his character and his integrity. I appreciate your question about Senator Whitehouse's proposed legislation at that time. In my recollection of my testimony on that act, and I think I may have been the only Republican witness in the committee testifying that day. I could be wrong about that, but that we were talking about the various constitutional or not aspects of the bill, and that my testimony focused not really on policy questions of ethics, but some of the particulars in the act, like the lower court panels sitting to evaluate recusal decisions of Supreme Court justices, and that I was pointing out that in our system that has the Supreme Court vested with judicial authority at the top of Article 3, that there were real constitutional questions about allowing inferior judges, is referred to in the Constitution, inferior courts, to sit in judgment really of any decisions of the Supreme Court, and that there were also a lot of open questions in our system about the way that ethics decisions should be adjudicated. But I do not recall commenting on the policy of the justice's decision to file recusals. And again, my understanding is that even though it's not covered statutorily in quite the same way as lower courts, that the Supreme Court, by its own statements and commitments, upholds the statutory recusal requirements in exactly the same way and with the same rigor that lower courts do.
So when it comes to the constitutional compliance, do you believe that receiving millions of dollars in gifts and not disclosing them is in the best interest of our Constitution?
Well, Senator, again, and I don't mean to comment first on the premise of the question. My recollection is that all reporting requirements there were dealt with and addressed. And the constitutional question, again, I think the provisions in the bill, as I recall, that were the focus of my testimony are about how these types of requirements are to be enforced. And the Supreme Court, as I recall, I think a statement by Chief Justice Roberts at the time, again, emphasized how devoted the Supreme Court and every justice is to complying with ethics requirements. The main constitutional and legal questions before the committee that day were which actors in our system are responsible for making sure those agreements are followed, and questions about how two co-equal branches are to interact and how lower court judges interact with superior court judges.
I think the reputation of the Supreme Court is important enough for us to be willing to consider new ideas on enforcement. Current rules do not work. There are too many gifts that go undisclosed to the justices serving on the highest court of the land. The Supreme Court of the United States, the highest court in the land, should not have the lowest standard of ethics. And when you testified, and as you mentioned, the only one who testified against this bill for reform, it left a lasting impression with me. I respect very much your education and what you've achieved in your life. It's remarkable. But this is one question that still remains unanswered as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, could you ask your team to either turn up the air conditioning or build a fire, one or the other?